So, Umbraco Practitioners, what is this all about then? Well, who am I guess? My name is Mike Taylor. I'm the digital director of a company called Flag. We're a creative comms agency in London, Cambridge. We've got people in New York and various other places in America as well. We specialize in sort of corporate sustainability comms, but we're an agency, so we do whatever our clients want us to do. My personal background is in web development, front end, back end, classic ASP, all the way through to .NET to Umbraco. Done various training courses in Umbraco, some of them twice for some reason, but not for a while, not since version 4, I don't think. We did various Umbraco sites a few years ago. I've been 3 code gardens. I was inaugural Code Cabin. I think I probably made Code Cabin really fun for everyone, but more recently, less development, less coding for me. I did a master's in HCI design, so that's all kind of front end strategy, user experience, that kind of thing. So that I don't think I would probably classify myself as a coder anymore, particularly. So that's probably my background. That's Owen. He's not here. I don't know if you probably all know who Owen is anyway. Technical developer at Lewis, certified Umbraco master, which is impressive. MVP, lots of pull requests. Very passionate about this. Passionate about engaging more people in the community, but also people from roles that are outside of the traditional developer roles into the community. He organises Edinburgh and Community Corner, and he also runs a bit. I don't know if anyone knew that about him. Occasionally goes for a run. So what is the premise of this virtual meetup? I mean, essentially it's this: how can we engage or encourage more community engagement with non-developers? And I've put non-developers in quotes because I'm not sure that I particularly like the phrase non-developer, but basically anyone who is not front-end or back-end development. And why do we want to do that? Well, I think it's because outside of the developer community, there's a lot of skills and expertise and knowledge and experience in those roles that would benefit the Umbraco community. And similarly, I think the Umbraco community can impart knowledge and context to those roles that will help those people do their jobs better as well. So it's this kind of double-edged 2 sides of a coin thing that I've got in my head. Let's have a look. This session, I mean, this is, like I said before, it's completely up for grabs, but these are the kinds of things that I think we're trying to find out tonight. I won't read them all out. So who is involved in the conception, creation, and delivery of Umbraco websites? I mean, lots of people are involved in projects that touch Umbraco, and all of these people are potentially brilliant people with lots of experience and lots of knowledge. This is probably where I see what you would traditionally think of as, I don't even know how you say this, Umbracians, I don't know, Umbracians, I'm not sure how you say it. It's not quite as straightforward as that. This is probably oversimplified just to make a point, but you get the idea that there's lots of stuff going on here that I think we are able to use better, I guess. Yes, so 2 sides of the coin. How would people in non-developer roles benefit from being more involved or engaged with Umbraco itself, the product, and the community more widely? And how can these people contribute their expertise and knowledge back to Umbraco and the community and to other people in those roles, I guess, as well? So the first of those 2 things, like some of these people might not even know what Umbraco is. They may never have touched it. If you're a UI designer, you're tasked in your role to design a website, an end product website for a client, and that website is going to be built in Umbraco. What information might be useful to you as a UI designer about Umbraco that might help you do your job better? It might be how the content is structured or how the pages are constructed from that content, or there's all kinds of things that might be useful context for you in order to do your job better. Umbraco as a product may only be one of a number of CMSs. I mean, agents is need to use, I guess, and in a lot of instances, a number of different content management products. So you might be a project manager that has to manage projects in all kinds of different CMSs. So what would be useful for you to know, I think. So I think the first part is how can we even raise the profile of Umbraco in some of those roles, and then provide those people with information and context about Umbraco to help them do their jobs better. This is something that occurs to me, is that if you are in the community and you're not a developer, some of the existing channels potentially a bit intimidating, and I don't mean intimidating in an aggressive way or anything like that. I just think that they're quite developer focused. So if you go and look at our Umbraco, or you go and look at the Slack channel or something like that, what you see is a lot of developers talking to other developers about development stuff. And obviously that is super important in order to have a good product and in order to make the end websites happen at all. But from somebody who doesn't speak developer, that it's hard to feel like you belong in that scenario. So I think there's a job to think about there in terms of what channels people use to communicate. The other thing is it's hard to, well, potentially not hard, it's potentially easier to engage people if there's a clear benefit to them off that engagement. So if we could create channels, spaces, content, experiences that provide value to those other roles, I think it's an easier sell if there's obvious value. Platforms for communication that those roles might be familiar or comfortable with. So, don't do everything on GitHub if designers don't communicate over GitHub, that kind of thing. Again, probably oversimplified, but worth thinking about. And then potentially drawing attention to Umbraco specific scenarios from the perspective of other people's roles, non-developer roles. So I guess, how might we get some of that stuff up and running is something that this meetup could discuss. I've got some ideas on some of that stuff, but the other side of the coin is how could these other roles contribute back to the Umbraco project in the broader sense. So one way is to help other people. That's share tips, processes, guidelines, workflows, share context of their roles with other people that will engage them in the project, have more open dialogue, better collaboration with developers. I'm thinking things like writing content for guidance for content editors in the back end. Very often things like how the instructions that you give people for how to complete a field, those bits of text are often written by developers. Are there better people with better skills than developers for writing that content or writing documentation? You might want somebody with kind of some editorial or technical writing background to input into those sorts of things. Here we go. Look, I'm not just going to read all these things out, but there's various ways that other roles can help improve Umbraco as a product. And I think that's probably where my head is the most in this thing. Like, how can we get people with UX expertise to help provide their expertise to improve the back office product? So a few potential ideas, which I won't talk through in detail because they were on the attending invite page. But these are the sorts of things that might help the Umbraco experience, explore the actual UI and UX of the back office itself, maybe create some sort of back office UI kit. That's probably something that, Niels, you might be interested in, or there might be stuff already at Umbraco.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I get still talking now.
No, that's okay. So it's like, what would a back office UI kit do? It would help people. It would give people a tool that would help them explore ways of improving the UI or UX of Umbraco. It might help people design better packages, or explore different options for doing things. I guess there's a question about how somebody with a UX background might contribute their work to Umbraco, because obviously contributions to Umbraco from developers is not straightforward, but there's a channel there. You can do a pull request, and the pull request gets merged, and it's a technical process. But if your contribution is not code, how might there be a way that we can contribute that work to the product? If you're a project manager, how could you contribute back to the community? It might be that you write some blog posts about your workflow or produce documentation from a project management perspective rather than from a product perspective. That might be useful. If you're designing for Umbraco projects, it might be that oh, sorry, where did we get to? You might want to think about how we can generate some sort of way of creating shared understanding or shared language of the product that enables people to talk about the same things during the project development process. Maybe show some examples of some design documentation or something. And then I just have tacked a bit on the end, and this might or may not, this may be too broad, I think, but general articles or information about things like accessibility or interaction design or analytics or something like that might be useful. These sorts of things. So that's, I mean, I'm going to sort of stop talking because I think probably what I'd quite like to do is hear what you guys have got to say. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts first. Anyone want to put their hand up and talk a bit? Well, it's going to be a short meetup if nobody wants to say anything.
At least I can say that I think it's really good thoughts, and I actually had on my to-do to kind of figure out how we can engage people in other ways than by code. So I think this is really great. I think it completely aligns with my thoughts, and I think it's really great to engage the community because I am a single guy right now, and I won't be able to fix everything myself, and I won't like to fix it myself because I think we need you guys to give the stories and the reasons to make things the way we will make it in the future. We need the stories and we need the insights that you have. So yeah, I'm really excited to see how we gather this information and how we can engage people.
That's great. Has anyone, I mean, I can start talking about some specific examples of the kinds of things that I've been, I mean, well, look, I'll just get some, I'm just going to share Safari. Okay, so this is something that I just looked at today. So a lot of the examples that I'm going to be talking about are probably sort of UI UX examples because that's where my expertise probably sits. But this is a good example. This is a V8 issue on GitHub about a UI UX issue. It's quite a valid one actually. It's about the split view in V8, which it's pretty relevant. And I think the V8 stuff, the interface of V8 is super interesting because it's trying new stuff out. Because the experience that it's trying to provide is more complex than Umbraco has been in the past. Variants and different support for different languages and that kind of thing. So this is a good example of an issue where you click on the language selector, and as you hover your mouse down, you sort of automatically enter split view by mistake because of the positioning of the open in split view link. It's a kind of very specific issue, but this kind of, how might somebody with a UX background be able to provide some input on issues like this? That's one example. There's a very big conversation about changing tabs to an accordion. I don't know if anyone's been following this on the back end. This is a super long thread, and obviously that's interesting to me as well because I think that I can definitely see both sides of this argument. But actually, from and I have no idea really what happens at HQ about this stuff, whether it's tested or not. I mean, I'm sure this, like everything else, I'm sure you guys are trying stuff out and seeing what works, and trying stuff out and seeing what works. I don't know if there's any formal testing going on.
Yeah, so here in the club, I actually don't know, but I know this one is up for debate. Are we going to come with a different solution? So
yeah, okay.
So I guess if that's nice to know, then yeah, we are coming up with that. with a fix, sort of, you can say, because the collapsing and expanding doesn't really give any usage to.
I mean,
From our perspective, what people are missing now is the ability to jump to
yeah.
something
Yeah, I
concrete.
think that's right. I think it's partly the ability to jump, but also if you can see everything in one go at the top of the screen, you gather a mental model of what there is lower down. Whereas if you're relying on people to scroll and discover, it's a bit less intuitive.
Yeah.
But that loss of intuitivity may be compensated for by the fact that split view then lets you do the translations all in one go or something like that. So all of this stuff is a bit of a balancing act, but you know, I think that's kind of interesting to me. I've got some other stuff here. So this is who's this guy? Weird. Yeah. So this is Matt. This is something that he posted on Twitter about how he's been mocking up screens for T-commerce and using Figma. So this is a good example of where something like a UI kit would be useful, I think, because I guess there are people all over the place doing this kind of stuff for back-end packages, all reinventing the wheel and doing their own. Let me see if I can. Yeah. This is a V7 screen. But yeah, you see the point. I mean, if people have got kind of a formal or official or even semi-official Sketch UI kit or Figma or XD, I guess there's a conversation to be had about exactly what that would work in best, but that's a good example of that. Here's a recent post on Twitter about accessibility. Mike's looking at changing icon fonts to SVG is probably a great idea, but accessibility generally is not a topic that you hear discussed very much around Umbraco. This is another question from Barry about accessibility. So there is kind of, these conversations are happening, and I think that I'm quite interested in figuring out, I don't have any answers particularly, but figuring out how we might be able to answer some of those questions or provide some tools for people. Anyone just talk?
Yeah, it's if you don't mind if I just jump in there.
No, please, yeah.
It's great that you brought up Figma, in fact, because that was going to be my next point. And it occurred to me recently as well, having done some work with Figma, that it would be superb to have a UI kit for the Umbraco backend to be able to mock things using what is a really good and free tool out there, and I think really crosses the bridge well for both designers and developers. So I think that's a really good step in that in achieving that. You mentioned about bringing other people of different backgrounds into the community, and for me, I'm based in Ireland, and for example, we just had our first Umbraco meetup recently, and there's not really many in the Umbraco community or using Umbraco implementers agencies in Ireland. And one of the realizations I had, that to grow the Umbraco community, it would be really useful to be able to reach out to potential people who could evangelize for using the CMS within their agencies. And I think UX design people, project managers, all that would be really great to bring into that kind of a setting as well, into a meetup community setting, to learn about Umbraco. So I think that would be something I'd like to try and reach out to from my end of things, is bringing people in the agency space who have never used Umbraco, who potentially have skills that obviously feed into the delivery of projects but aren't necessarily developers themselves, into the meetup end of things.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think that I think if one of the things about any content management project is that there are two jobs to do in terms of user experience, aren't there? There's pushing the content out to the website, but getting the content in is as important a user experience as pushing it out the other end, and it's a user journey that not doesn't, sometimes it's given the prominence it requires, but very often it's sort of an afterthought, and the developers are left to kind of figure out the best structure for the data and that kind of thing. I think that the point you made about Figma is really good. I'm slightly concerned about UI kit thing, just because there are so many different programs at the moment. It's a bit of a hot potato at the moment. I'm just looking at my Mac. I've got XD, Axure, Balsamic, Figma, Framer, InVision Studio. There's loads. But I guess things like Zeppelin as well might make that easier, because you can feed from a number of things via plugins into something like Zeppelin. So that might be worth looking at, I guess. Great. Useful. Content editors as well, I guess, would be useful for you in Ireland as well, because I think there's probably a distinct difference between people who, I don't know if this happens in other agencies, but we often find that we in the agency end up populating content in the content management system on behalf of the client, because we deliver a content management website, but they might only do a news article every 2 months, and actually every 2 months you've got to learn it all again. It might be easier for the agency to do it. So sometimes your content editors are in agency.
That's a really good point.
That also very often happened for me in my previous job, and also that they underestimate the task to put in the content, so it ends up the agency having to put in 200 articles.
But it also means, on a plus side, it means that in agencies there should be a pretty good base of people who are able to talk to content editors in companies who about that content editing experience, and can feed into decisions about how to make good data entry interfaces, good doc type editors and what have you. So what about project management? I'm looking at you, Lucy, because I'm hoping you're going to say something. Anything from a PM perspective that you think would be useful?
I think it's probably a bit more broader than something detailed as a UX designer or a content editor. It's knowing how Umbraco works, what the functionality is, and having a close relationship with the developer to understand where they need, A, what they need, and B, how they will build the function that the client requirements fit, to understand how the project will be managed and will play out. But I think knowing a little bit more about Umbraco and how it works and the different elements would a PM in good stead to liaise between client and developer. I think often a lot gets lost between knowing the technical ability and functional capability of Umbraco versus perhaps what the client's needs are, and then making that into a plan that can be managed easily. So I think from my perspective, we probably don't do project management in-house in the same way as other agencies. Matt's particularly good at mapping things out in his head, so I tend to know what the requirements are together, and I keep the time schedule going, as opposed to perhaps breaking the elements down and mapping those out in any kind of way. And clients that we work with quite often like us to, there's one client in particular that's excellent at passing on great amounts of information, which helps massively. But I think a lot of our clients tend to let us go develop and come back and deliver, and that works for us. But obviously, a lot of agencies don't work like that. And they have to have milestones and deliverables as they go along. So I think in an agency setting in particular, PM buy-in to the community and the various things that they can learn is a big deal. I think more broadly speaking, for all the other different kind of non-dev roles, it's great that we're having these conversations here and where we think we might take this forward. I think there needs to be a bigger buy-in from agency bosses, directors, to promote their teams at large, to go out to events, to go to meetups, because they will only benefit from that as an agency. So it's making sure that there is that buy-in to CMS Umbraco. So
I think you're absolutely right, and I also think that there's potentially an opportunity for people in agencies to evangelize Umbraco more broadly across the team, drag a designer to a meetup, drag a copywriter to a meetup, or a project manager who they may never have heard of Umbraco before. They may not care about it, but get them in front of it and get them to have a look at how it works. And so I think there is a job, a sort of an internal advocacy job to do. I wrote down internal advocacy as a phrase, but also external advocacy in the sense that if you are a UX designer and you've got strong opinions about something to do with the UX in Umbraco, you can do a talk at a meetup or do a blog post or something like that, and that creates content that's out there for people who are also in non-developer roles they can find it and it'll speak to them, and then it might make them feel like there is value there for them as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's selling the CMS to clients as well. So it's not just about the developer, and that's the CMS of choice. And I think the whole team needs to understand what it can and where it can go, and therefore client handlers, whether it's dependent on how the jobs are broken down in an agency in particular, it is about selling the value of why Umbraco is used, and having the buy-in from the rest of the team, not just the developers, will help to do that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Do you have any non-developers kind of like making decisions for how the backend should be structured, or what property types should be used? Or?
No, I don't think so. I don't think well, you might have a developer involved in the wireframing process of a site, talking about how that content might be structured in the CMS, so that you can understand how the navigation is driven, or how the page is constructed from the content that ends up in the CMS. But no, I think the people who make decisions, generally speaking, about how the implementation is done tend to be developers. I don't know if that's something that you guys agree with.
Yeah, it's my experience as well. But it would be interesting if some companies had, I don't know, UXers doing back office or kind of like figuring out how it should be structured, and then I think it could be interesting to have them telling stories about what they've done to kind of share with each other and start a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when
I tend to see that companies are doing it in one way, so I would love them to see how others are doing it to kind of inspire each other, which could also help with what you're talking about, Lucy, to make non-developers aware about what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's things like if you're doing wireframes early on in a project to kind of figure out how the website is going to end up. If you're annotating those wireframes with content management considerations right from the beginning, you're starting to have the conversations at the right point, rather than coming out with a high fidelity design and then passing it over to someone to make all the decisions about how it's going to work. So I think a lot of it is making sure you're talking about the right stuff early enough in the process.
Yeah,
we find that easier in those instances, definitely. That assists Matt as the developer to structure the back office in a more meaningful way, because we know what content it has to share, and we can think of the best ways in which to structure that. And from my point of view, it makes for a much smoother process, because we know what expectations are, we know the different elements, and therefore I think those conversations are really important early on. It's often the case that design, particularly for freelance developers working with freelance designers or design agencies separately, those conversations come a lot harder often, and so therefore perhaps the designers aren't aware of Umbraco and how it works. There's a lot of the options are, so it just makes it a little bit more difficult. So having that buy-in would help certainly.
Probably also lets you manage, or at least have a better awareness of the impact of changes later on in the project. So if you want to change the design here, at least there's somewhere you can point out where you understand the knock-on impact on the implementation of design changes that happen later on. So.
That's it.
Good. So I guess if anyone got any other thoughts, that would be sort of useful. I guess the next thing really is to work out what we're going to do next. You know, obviously I'm very happy to do, well, not very happy, we definitely will do one of these last Wednesday of every month, but I guess there's a need to do something tangible and create something, make something happen off the back of these. So I think that the obvious one to me is to start talking, I guess, to you, Niels, about, and the other people on this meetup, about a UI kit and what the possibilities might be for that. I'm interested in being involved in that. I don't know if anyone else on here is UI UX based and interested in being involved in that, but I definitely think that's something that would be a real benefit to people. But there might be all kinds of things, so I'm totally open for other ideas. I think it's important to have sort of actionable things that come out of this, though. Otherwise, just kind of just talk every month and nothing will happen. So, anyone got any thoughts?
I'd be interested in your thoughts, people in the group here, on how, as you said, designers could potentially have a voice in the community. Is there a place or a space that can accommodate them on our, potentially, in a different way to how the developer conversations are hosted, I suppose? Is there some kind of way that we can make designers feel welcome on our? And is that the place for them? Is something like a user voice feature or something useful for the discussions to be had, for designers to contribute? I don't know, just spitballing ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a great question about the use of our, and whether it feels like a developer resource or whether it feels like something that we can talk to other people. I guess one of the questions that I would have is, how do designers talk to other designers? Because that might be a good place to start. I mean, I'm not really sure that, I mean, I'm not a designer, I don't know the answer to that. But, I guess inside the agencies we can discuss that stuff, and if that means people are putting links to something that shows a portfolio of stuff somewhere, that would be great, I guess. Erica, hello.
Hi.
You appeared suddenly.
I know. Well, I thought I was just going to chime in a few things. I am on the UX UI end of things, but I'm also certified in Umbraco, and I feel like that's helped me immensely to be able to liaise better and be that person between the client and the developer and bridging that gap. So I'd love to see maybe some kind of formal, informal course that all the non-tech people are encouraged within their agencies to take. That's more overview than even level 1 was, and level 1 was pretty basic when I took it. But
so you're talking about the Umbraco course?
Yeah, or okay. You know, either from HQ or maybe we as a group spin up some YouTube videos or you know, something like that, that just as overview to let them in on what goes behind the scenes. And so when they're talking to clients about content or designers are ideating things, they can kind of visualize how the back office is going to be put together. And I'd also love to see designers push more into learning doc types, UX designers specifically, to help developers create that better back office experience. I end up putting in a lot of content on some of the sites that I work on, and I hit a lot of frustrations. And so, and just how it was put together, not necessarily poorly, but you know, things that would help user flow. Some of that feedback probably needs to go back to Umbraco for how things are done, which I know, and I haven't really looked at V8 much lately, but the whole infinite editing loop and things I am very excited about from a UX perspective. But I think, like I said, like having that knowledge of the back office has helped me immensely in my career. And I think that if we can talk to more non-techie people and get them more interested in learning that, it will close that feedback loop. And then the second thing I wanted to jump in on, UI kits are awesome, but they are super hard to maintain and they get outdated really, really quickly. So that's just my caution.
I guess especially when something is so in flux like V8 is likely to be.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that is a really good point.
Yeah. And I know something that we did, I was on an agency that originally started Marcello. I'm not even sure if it's still out there or if it's totally defunct. But we stuck to wireframes only with the concept of it needs to match the back office when it's getting developed. So make sure you look up class styles and whatever from Umbraco. So we didn't do full on designs, but just concentrated on functionality and moving pieces and ideas of where things were going to go in the flow. So UI kits would be awesome, but even maintaining a style guide and keeping that up to date is really hard. So I can't imagine that.
I mean, maybe it's not a high fidelity UI kit that's needed. Maybe it's like a kind of like really low fidelity representation of the back office so that you can try things out, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think I had a thought while you were talking about your first point, which is that it would be great if people who have that who can bridge that gap would be able to document somewhere for this group or somewhere else what those frustrations are in the content editing experience are that you run into all the time, because then it would give us stuff as a group that we could explore. So I think that is part of what we need, is like something to get our teeth into, I guess, probably. So.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I can maybe add that there is no UI kit today, so it would definitely be interesting if someone would make one, or how it could be established. How would this be open source, and how can people contribute to it, and how can we maintain it, and how can we as well avoid that it becomes just a massive space of UI that doesn't really work together. Yeah, and I think what you see today in the back office, if you look in the code, is that there is not really a sort of a connected design. It is pieces here and there, and people have put in things together, and some things actually don't look the same. And we try to align it, but it's also what the community does. So someone maybe makes a feature, and then someone later comes and cleans it up and makes it fit better visually.
Yeah, and I think you have to do it like that, because otherwise you'd never get anything done. So
yeah. That's actually another thought that I had when I was listening earlier is I might not be able to do pull requests myself, but I see lots of little things. I'm a nitpicker because I'm a designer. So speaking to that point of, things might not match up, or you see a flow that you're like, oh, if you tweak this one thing, it could be infinitely better. Like, how can those UX UI people provide feedback to somebody who could actually do the pull requests?
Yeah.
So some kind of workflow to get that, and it's not creating an issue on GitHub, because I use GitHub, but I don't really know how to create issues either. So something easier for them to do that.
And I can maybe say from HQ, even though I'm not so much into it yet, that it can be an official voice, but I think it would be really great to hear proposals on how that could be done.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one.
Definitely support. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that occurred to me when I was planning this is that I don't really know what UI. I didn't know whether, like, if we as a group rock up with a load of wireframes going, like, we think the back office should work like this, that whether that's useful to the HQ, or whether they're just like, look, I mean, that's great, but we can't do anything with that, So
for me, it would be super useful, but I can't guarantee that it will be like that.
All right, that's great. Has anyone got any other things to feed in?
But I think it's a very interesting talk on how can we facilitate those conversations or those inputs, and how could that be done? Because as you're saying, it should not be a GitHub issue, but what platforms could be used. If anyone has great ideas, please let us know. That would be super nice.
If anyone has great ideas right now, that would be great.
Yeah.
No.
Perhaps I can chip in.
Yes.
on this. I'm Joke, project manager at the Reference in Belgium. the discussions that we're having at the moment almost feels like some kind of Tinder app that we're looking for. We see issues, we see improvements, but we're not sure if GitHub or Twitter or whatever channel is the right match. So I have the impression that with our feedback, we need to find our match in a developer who is willing to take on our feedback and work with it. But I'm not sure, in my head, it's some kind of, it makes me think of Tinder, where you can just say, hey, this is something for me. Yes, I like it. You can contact me to solve your problem, or no, this is not a topic I want to work on. But not sure how we can make this visible, or if it's even something people are thinking as, hey, that might be a good idea.
Almost like a proposal for something that someone can pick up, like the issue tracker, but for non-code things, I guess.
Yeah, because I think
I'm really not technical, so issue tracker.
No, exactly.
But I think if a designer went into GitHub and created a proposal there would be developers picking it up, which I think is super interesting. But the question is just how do we get the designer ideas into something like GitHub or somewhere where people can pick it up, or
into something that someone who knows and is comfortable with GitHub could link to, or something like that. Because I think getting designers to use GitHub is a fairly tough sell. Like I'm in the Slack channel, and I don't understand 98% of what people are talking about in the Slack channel. So I think that those communication channels are quite important to make sure that the people feel like they understand it sort of intuitively, how to contribute something. And yeah, I'm not sure that we completely have it yet, but we have another month before the next one of these. So I guess.
Well, that's an interesting point about Slack. I'm on Slack all the time. I don't dive into the Umbraco Slack channel very much because I don't understand 98% of what they're talking about. But even if that's a place to start, I don't know how many other non-developers or non-techie people are in there, but creating a channel that is, I don't necessarily want to call it design ideas, but if it's, creating some sort of channel to get a conversation flowing there.
Yeah, I mean, I think potentially it's a good point. I think I'm very comfortable with Slack. I use Slack or something similar all the time, just not in that environment talking about that stuff. So maybe you're right. Maybe it might be that simple, a different channel on Slack.
I think Hour might also be, or should on the face of it, be something that you could, segment a section for design on it. I don't know how and I think it is obviously structured around development conversations at the moment, but in some way, top level, break it out. I think a forum would be pretty accessible to people. I don't know, things on Slack could tend to get lost in the thread a bit easier than being able to see a top level view and
with a permanent link to something.
Forum.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So maybe that's a consideration too. I don't know what would be involved in making Hour more approachable for not just the developer audience. But the good thing about it is if you have the developer audience there to jump in on the discussions, because not everyone is in Slack either.
No, and that's another really important point, because all of the solutions to the things that we're talking about require technical context to the solution as well. So, all right, that's good.
How about using Twitter? I mean, hello.
Hey.
Hi.
Yep.
So y'all are speaking about. So my thing is just getting it like you said, to engage the non-technical people. So usually wouldn't Twitter be something also?
Yeah, I think Twitter is a channel that gets used quite a lot. I think that I don't know enough about probably how non-devs talk about Umbraco, or even if they do, to know whether.
So my thing is just not. Letting people know what you can do with Umbraco and making it easy because so I'm a very small developer, small programmer in Umbraco, and I know that we had a lot of issues with how to get the content up. I mean, how to get, how to structure the content, if I'm saying that correctly, make it easier for the person who's entering in the record. So I'm coming from that. I'm coming from there. So how, I guess you want to tell people that there is a better way to do something. So I'm from a bad implementation of Umbraco. We used it all wrong. So we want to tell people how to do it correctly, I guess, and give tips on that. I don't know. This is very, very basic compared to what you all are discussing, but maybe a starting point just to say, hey, I don't know. I mean, something like that.
Yeah, I think Twitter is a great platform for a certain type of communication. Obviously, it doesn't lend itself well to things that need a lot of explanation or examples or screenshots or that kind of thing. But it's a great place to get the word out and to link to things like that, for sure. Yeah.
So just recently. Oh, sorry. Okay.
I think the Umbraco forum is also very useful for the question what Nida asked. There is also many people are giving their suggestion and how we want to structure our data or document types and everything. Many people are discussing in Umbraco forum also. That would be another way of getting knowledge from the Umbraco developer side.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was talking in terms of just asking project managers or getting the content people, but then, okay, so that's all I have. So for example, recently on Twitter, someone mentioned that one of the ways to use, you could give rights to a publisher so that a person can write the content, but then give them the right to publish that. So that was something new for me. So things like that, I guess, if people are looking for items like that, it just makes it easier.
Yeah, like just tips.
Yeah, tips like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I have. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff, and obviously because of the number of different roles that are outside the developer role, obviously, I guess there's a danger, and I know that this is something that they spoke about at the Edinburgh meetup. There's a danger that the scope of this sort of thing is too big. So, I guess it may be that what we need to do is start in a sort of fairly focused way, and then see how we can broaden the focus out after that. But I think that we've got a couple of good things to think about, certainly on the channels and the maybe a UI kit, maybe something resembling a UI kit of some sort. Okay, what do we want to do as next steps for this? Do we want to do anything specific, or do we just want to go away this month and have a think about stuff and come back with some ideas for sort of tangible next steps on the next month maybe? It's a bit early to be thinking about very specific things, but I don't know, what do you think?
I think maybe broadcasting what's been discussed, not in sort of meeting minutes or anything, but just in terms of some of the ideas that have floated around from today's meet, and put that out on Twitter to try and get a conversation going around it with some more people.
Yeah.
And then, I think the point that Erica made about courses for specific non-dev practitioners is an interesting one. I think that's a good way probably to loop in with some of the basics or perhaps a little bit more advanced items. That's a good starter as well as the potential for the UI kit.
It might even be that in this environment going forwards, we can do some short talks on stuff as well, so that people who are in non-developer roles can just join onto this and get some value from this as a channel as well. So
yeah, I think encouraging people at local meetup level is quite important to get people there, whether it's dragging somebody from that you work within an agency to come along, and if nothing else, it's great to, from a social aspect, to come down and to see what's going on in the Umbraco community, but then learn more, and that brings them in to learn more about Umbraco if they perhaps aren't that invested yet they use it daily.
Then
it's not a crazy cult. But, no,
it's Moorish though, isn't it? Once you get a little bit, you do. It's hard to get away once you're in it. So, all right, that's really useful. If I'll let you get back on with your lives if you've got nothing else. But I think what I'll do is.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
No, go on.
I was just thinking it's super interesting to think about what's in it for the non-devs, as you talked about earlier. The session. That could be really interesting to see if someone has ideas about what could be the motivation to activate those people.
Yeah, and a lot of that is probably it's just a communication job, probably. So so something to think about in terms of how we make that happen, I guess.
And I think the Twitter idea was a great small idea, and I think I'll go to the communication department to present the idea about having a Umbraco tips account, maybe where they could share small stories. So it is, because then it also becomes easy for people to just read and learn small tips here and there. Instead of that you have to read a long blog posts to learn stuff, then you can just get a tip here and there every day, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right. I will put another one in for next month. I'll send some information around. I'll try and maybe even get this video out somewhere and see if that's useful for people. See if that can generate some more traction, I guess. I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming and joining in with this. I know that Owen wanted to be here, and he'll have like 1,000 ideas for what to do going forwards. But I know it's like very late for some of you, and kind of all different time zones. And that's one of the things that I think is great about this, is that it includes people who aren't just geographically co-located. So I think it's really useful. All right. Thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Really great.
Thanks for organizing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.